Lately, there's been an AI skill that's been gaining quite a bit of popularity and at least trending in my community. And it's one that I thought it would be fun to talk about. And it's a skill called I Have ADHD. Now, for those who are new to sort of like the AI skills part, like just to make sure we're all on the same page, what AI skills are essentially, most people when you're using AI, you're using a chatbot, you're going in, you're typing stuff, you're asking it questions, and that's fine. But skills are a way essentially for people to kind of package these reusable steps that you kind of want the AI to do every time. So if you think of, for instance, if you're like, okay, well, every time I ask it for this particular thing, like when I want it to teach me something, I want it to follow these particular steps in terms of like how it phrases things. And so I think skills is actually, funny enough, a very good descriptor for what we're providing the AI, because it's kind of like if we think of a skill as like someone being able to hit a ball with a bat, for example, right? That is a skill that someone has. You can say, okay, the goal for the skill is that you're going to swing the ball, you're going to swing the bat, it's going to hit the ball. And so while that sounds pretty straightforward up front, the reality is we all know the skill of actually hitting a ball with a bat is one that's not 100%. There's a lot of if, ands, buts when it comes to how the ball is being thrown at you, whatnot. And so as a result, I think that skills is quite apt for AI, because what it does is it tries its best to accommodate the skill, but it doesn't have 100% certainty. Again, just like trying to swing at a ball with a bat. And so that's why I do think skill is actually quite aptly named for it. In the development world, we often call things scripts that we are writing with code, right? And so what it does is it does things with essentially 100% predictability. So if you think of a calculator, for example, a script might be if you enter these four numbers in sequential, you add them all together, you always get this output. Scripts are similar. You say something like, hey, at 8 a.m., I want you to go out to the latest blogs. I want you to fetch the summaries. I want you to, put that all in an email and send it back to me. And it does that with basically 100% certainty, as long as everything's available, nothing goes wrong. Like it's basically set every single time. And so those are scripts. And so that's why I'm glad they don't call them AI scripts, because they're far from it, in the sense that AI will not always do the thing that you want it to do. And that's actually part of the interesting things about skills. And so again, love the name skills. And so yeah, let's jump into this new skill. So here I have the repo open for I Have ADHD. And so as we can see, there's actually quite a bit going on inside of this repo. And so for the crux of what we're really looking at, we're going to actually dive into the skills for the I Have ADHD, which is found right here inside the skills directory. And then for those who are new to skills, basically there are the generally agreed upon format is that the skill is always defined inside of skill.md. And then it looks like inside of the agents here, there's basically some metadata that you can attach for the different harnesses, which basically are tooling that allows you to kind of like better work with models and that kind of thing. And so, yeah, so basically this skill MD file is basically what consists of everything. And so let me go ahead and let's see, can I collapse this real quick so we can make this easier to read? Perfect. Okay, so if we take a look at this, again, for those who are new to skills, as we can see here, all skills they're markdown files. Everything up here is front matter in standard YAML format. So basically these three dashes. And so, again, so that said, so again, all markdown, but we're just gonna use the renderer here so that it's a little bit easier for everyone to read. I'm gonna go ahead and hide this files right here. And so, okay, let's go ahead and start from the top. Okay, so the purpose of the I Have ADHD is essentially, actually, you know what, now that I think about it, let me take a look at this real quick. So before we jump into what the skill actually does, let's scroll down here into the README. And the whole purpose of this skill is that it basically criticizes the fact that a lot of times when you're working with a coding agent or an agent in general, it's very verbose in its response. And so people have criticized it for like token usage and that kind of thing. But this one just kind of addresses the fact that like, well, it's not so much about tokens, just it's hard for me to comprehend. And so if we scroll down here, this is kind of what they're kind of pitching here, is that rather than sort of burying the answer inside this giant paragraph where you have to read through, kind of parse, instead it just kind of formats it in a way that's like very easy to understand. And in a way, it basically improves the user experience because it gets at what you really want as far as what's going on. And so basically it looks like there are 10 key rules that it tries to say. And so let's see. Number one, lead with the next action, use multi next step tasks, end with a concrete next step, suppress tangents, restate state at every turn, specific time estimates, make wins visible, matter of fact errors, cap list at 5 items, no preamble, no recap, no closers. Okay. So generally speaking, that sounds good as far as the AI agent goes. This is one thing I do want to comment on, because earlier we talked about the naming of the idea of AI skills and how it's fairly representative, and I think it's a good word for what you're providing the agent. Again, a reusable set of guidelines that can provide them a way to do something. And so the funny thing, though, is that inside of skills, though, the common word choice or vernacular that's kind of been used when it comes to talking about AI skills is the idea that you're providing rules inside of the skills that theoretically the agent should not be breaking. And so when it comes to the decision on the decision to name and the fact that we keep calling them rules, I think is actually quite misleading from a terminology perspective within our community, and actually for just the general public, because if we think about people who are not coders, then a lot of times they're thinking about things in the way they're sort of familiar with. And rules, for instance, is honestly, I would say no different than we could have called them laws at the same time too. Because why? Because they are supposed to be things that we do not break. And there are often consequences as a result of it, right? So if the rules say, you're at the swimming pool, right? What's the common rule that you have at the swimming pool, right? No running around the swimming pool deck. And so anyone who's grown up, I can speak specifically within the U.S. If you grow up in the swimming pool and as a kid you were running around, usually the lifeguard would yell at you and be like, hey, stop. You're not supposed to run around the pool. And then as adults, we have things that are a bit more severe from a consequence perspective, right? If you're speeding on the highway, you get caught, there's fines, points added to your license, that kind of thing. The problem I have with the name rules is that it implies that there is some sort of incentive for the AI, and more importantly, there is some sort of predictability with it. So in other words, when the rule is something like, don't delete production database, and many people have put those kind of rules inside of their skills, I think the general public, when they hear that, they go, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Don't delete the production database, right? Don't do this thing, right? It's very straightforward. Again, as people as we live in society within the English language, that seems just about as straightforward as it can be. But for anyone who's used AI skills for a while, or if you haven't, they're not really rules, right? And so, cue the Pirates of the Caribbean meme. Like they're really more like guidelines than they are rules. And so that's what I think is unfortunate about this choice of word, because it, I think, sets up people for failure, because it uses a mental model that is already well established inside like society as a whole and the language. And so to call them rules, and yet the fact that they're not reliable as far as like, let's say the AI agent listening to rules, it just creates, I think, sets people up for basically a disappointment and frustration, because they think, I explicitly told it not to do this and yet it violated it. And the reality is they're not rules. But okay, enough of a tangent on rules. Let's go ahead and jump right into actually what's going on. And so actually this will be interesting, because you'll get to see a little bit more about what I'm talking about. And so for those who are new to the anatomy of skills and how they're created, generally speaking, the convention is that inside, when you're creating skills, they live inside a skills directory. And this one clearly only has one skill, the I have ADHD skill. And then the general format here is that you have it inside of a skill MD file. And then it looks like this agents folder here is basically contains some basic, I want to say, configuration. So yeah, this is some things to just explain how to use it within certain codes. So like OpenAI, this Gemini. So basically, these are more configuration things. So let's go and take a look at the skill itself. And so again, for those who are new to skill creation or how it works in the anatomy, skills are not some sort of magical like black box that like you have no idea of how to, like, it's not magic. Whereas like you could argue a lot of times when we're looking at other people's code, sometimes especially if it's a language we're not familiar with, looking at the raw code is sometimes really hard to actually parse and understand what's happening. But again, one of the reasons why I think the AI development and this kind of stuff has gotten really popular is because underneath the hood, all of this, if we take a look at the raw file here, we're just looking at Markdown files. And if you're new to Markdown, it just means that they're plain text files, and they just have some opinionated syntaxes that allow you to do the things that you wanted to do. So for example, this right here is like front matter. It's in the YAML syntax and format, and allows you to basically describe some properties. Allows you to describe some properties of the actual file. So in this case, you can see what is the name, what's the description for this thing. And so it lets programs easily read the file and gain like metadata from it. And then the rest of Markdown is really just this idea that you're writing it in, and then you have these little syntaxes like to hashtag marks is like H2s, that kind of thing. So now that we're all on the same page, let's take a look at actually what's going on inside of here. And so here we have your standard, what is this? The reader has ADHD. Output is not just brief. It's shaped so that the ADHD can act on it. Again, funnily, I know it's named cheekily, I have ADHD, but it's really just designed to turn AI prompt into something that's more actionable and easier for people to read and understand. And so, all right, so persistence, these will apply to every response to the session, not only this one. Did not expire? Great, turn them off. Only when it says stop ADHD mode. I mean, interesting. Again, these are guidelines that we can certainly try. And then what it changes about reading. So yeah, so it provides some context about how ADHD works. Working memory is small. Don't expect readers to keep remember things. Knowing the answer is not doing the answer. Interesting. I mean, interesting ways of like describing it. Like the friction between got it and done it is where work dies. Like this is a weird phrasing. Like who done it? It's done. So that's the funny thing about sometimes when you skills. I know a lot of people end up using AI to write skills because I think there is I don't want to go so far as to say false belief, but there's certainly this idea that, well, an AI agent would know better about what it needs for a skill than I would. And that's hopefully something that over time I'd like to, help create resources to help demystify that bit so that people feel more comfortable actually writing the skills themselves rather than feeling like they're delegating it to the AI because they think the AI knows better, because in their mind, theoretically, the AI is consuming it. But that's neither here nor there. Starting is the next step. Yep. Time feels uniform a bit. Sure. Okay. So again, once again, rules. It's really this guideline. So lead with the next action. That's great. So in the skill anatomy, you'll see here that they usually try to describe what it is within, again, I'm going to call them guidelines because I really just don't like the word rules. And so it's telling them, basically what is the guideline and giving some examples like what's bad, what's good. And then, yep, some like conditionals, exceptions, right? If the answer is the command, path or snippet goes first, pros comes after, if at all. Okay, so basically describing some format. And then here, again, once we have some bad, we have some good, basically trying to be descriptive about using the fewest steps. Again, I do think, when I see stuff like this, like use a few steps that will still work, cut any steps that the reader does not need. It's interesting. Like, I think as a principle, that's fine. And it makes sense. That's actually what, like, if we think about good user experience design, we're trying to minimize the number of steps users need to take. But when it comes to doing things, I do wonder sometimes if that gives AI a little too much freedom to cut things that might actually be important. So it almost be like saying when you leave the house, locking the door is technically optional. So really the step should be like open door, leave house, and like keep going to destination. But locking the door is important from a security perspective. And so it's little things like that that I do think are a bit riskier in that regard, but that's neither here nor there. Okay. And yeah, so anyways, I don't think we need to walk through every single one, but you can see here, if you want to walk through it, end with concrete actions, suppress tangents. The restate state at every turn is kind of interesting because it basically says that, like, don't expect the reader to remember that we're on step 3. So just be like very explicit about it. And then otherwise, time estimates. This is kind of an interesting one to me because time estimates to me I haven't had the best experience when it comes to AI and time estimates. And it'll be like, you know what? I think this work is going to take like 3 days. And then maybe it's assuming that you're doing everything by hand. I don't know. But I find that sometimes the estimates are just either wildly inaccurate. So it's funny that it wants specific ones. Make completed work invisible. Oh, make it visible. Sorry. Okay. Login works now. Good. Login now works with magic links. Okay, I guess that makes sense. Oh, I say, okay, I see. It's saying login. Interesting. Okay, and then, yeah, so cap it at 5 items. Interesting. No preamble. I mean, this is probably a big chunk of it, I would say, in terms of like, honestly, if I were to break this down into its core guidelines, is to minimize the preamble, recap, closing pleasantries, which is probably a chunk of like the verbosity that we get from AI. And then that's not relevant. I would say that one's important. Suppressed tangents is probably good because the AI sometimes does do that. The multi-step definitely makes it easier as well. Yeah, I would say those are probably the 3 key ones. Again, leading with next action, like all this stuff is, the other stuff is fine, but I think I might cut it. I could, if I were to customize this skill for like, call it like, yeah, like a different, I might do it slightly differently. And so that's something that we can certainly look at in a future video for sure. But I think for this video, I want to focus specifically on just sort of covering the AI skills as a concept, sort of exploring this and then trying it out. And so which we'll be doing shortly. When to break rules. This is interesting. Again, it's so funny that it's like when to break the rules. And perhaps, as I'm talking about this, the reason why we try to say the rule, So as I think about this, the reason why we probably try to use the word rules is because we aspire to have an AI that can follow rules. And so it's perhaps trying to use the weight of the way rules work in the English language, that guidelines gives AI the impression that it can maybe go around it more. But I just think the issue more at hand is that the users, who are human beings who are used to using rules in a specific context, it just makes it sound like these 10 rules that we have up here are always going to be followed. And in fact, when it comes to breaking, then like somehow we can tell it reasons to break rules, when the reality is that the AI will break the rules whenever it decides to, or if it just happens to forget the rules. And so if anything, it's more like these are, I guess if I were to rename this, instead of when to break the rules, it'd be more about, it's almost like exceptions to the guidelines, but yeah, it's just, again, just interesting. Again, here, you can see it right here. So it's funny. Destructive action, right? Confirm before acting, safety wins over brevity. I can't tell you, this is probably the most popular, this is the most popular rule that I think so many skills or people's prompts and stuff tend to have. And it's the one that has proven time and time again that it just does not listen. And again, this is something that you would think it's as explicit as humanly possible, but it's not. And more importantly, the AI forgets it does things. But it is in here, of course, because it's trying to cover its bases. But how much that really saves people, I certainly would not bet the farm on it. Let's put it that way. Yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, okay. So you kind of got a high level. You can see, again, it's trying to give as much context to the AI of how to do the skill well and, pre-send check. I mean, yeah, it's kind of interesting. But yeah, let's just test it out and see how it goes. So in terms of working with the skill, let's go ahead and see how it works. Okay. All right, so what we're going to do now, let's go ahead and hop inside our terminal, and we're going to go ahead and use Claude to go set up the marketplace. And so the marketplace, if you haven't done this before, basically it's saying that, hey, inside the Claude plugin ecosystem, just add this repo so that we can install stuff from it. That's all this is doing. And so then you can that's how you actually install it, because now it knows to look inside of this repo to like add the skill. And so great, we've had it. That's awesome. It's now added. So now let's go ahead and fire up Claude Code. And so if we look at the skills that we have, we should see there it is. I have ADHD. Otherwise, okay, that's good. So we can say this is the scenario we're going to play with today. So we're going to start, and I'm going to ask it which model am I on right now, real quick. We are on default. Again, let's go ahead and play around with Fable for this one, since I have access to it right now. And let's go ahead and say, how do I build a drag and drop app like Trello with Vue 3 and TypeScript? All right, let's go ahead and fire that off and see what happens. And so inside of here, you'll notice that as it's going, it's automatically loading a Vue skills bundle that I've been playing with. So this is going to be, it looks like part of its recommendation. So to be clear, this is going to augment kind of what the default Fable 5 would do without the Vue skills that provide some of the best practices. Okay. In the meantime, what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and session. Okay. So while this is running, we're going to go ahead and create another tab. I'm going to fire up Claude over here, and we're going to let this run as well. So what I'm going to do here is we're on, which model are we on? We are still on Fable, which is great. And this time though, I'm going to do the I have ADHD skill. And this time I'm going to follow the same thing. How do I build a drag and drop app like Trello with Vue 3 and TypeScript? All right, so that's going to go ahead and run. And so you can see here, it's also loading its best practice. And yeah, let me see. Yep. So let's see, can I do that? Yes, perfect. We're going to do it side by side. Oh, never mind. All right. There we go. All right. So that's running. That's running. Okay. So it looks like the I have ADHD one has already responded. So let's go ahead and see what we got here. Bum, bum, bum. Okay, so it gives a little preamble. Great project. Trello Clone expresses this. Sure. All right, so here we go. So we see some of the recommendations already. So the multi-step stack decision first. Don't hand roll, drag and drop. So it already mentions that these are some options in terms of doing that. So that's nice. So it gives me an action for how to install it, which is great. Data model, source of truth, cards inside the columns array. Order is the array order, no position field in sync. Great. So it gives me some examples for the types. Component map, board state across every column, so it belongs in a composable. Great. And so, or opinion store for persistency. It was good. I mean, good advice so far. Everything's good on that front. And then state composable, looking good, except which view draggable needs to mutate. Yeah. Okay, great. And then where drag and drop actually happens. So then that actually gives me the full component for this one. And so we see here, define props is coming in, define emits. And then it goes down, sure, template card, ghost class, card ghost, okay. Comes through and then highlights exactly what makes it work. I'd like this, group cards, item key. So again, very easy to read and parse so far, honestly. Min height on list explains why, right? With the min height, it collapses to 0, can't drop it. Great. I mean, these are things that like someone new to a drag and drop app would completely miss. Board and card round out. Okay, this is just like the remaining like sort of components. And then persistence, watch columns on deep true while writing to the local storage so that you don't need a real backend, a real add card from, yep. And then you can scaffold it, drag cards immediately. That's unnecessary. So it's interesting. So this one actually, look at this, brewed for only 1 minute and 0 seconds. And this one, let's see, did 35 seconds. So this one, let's actually take a look at what happened here. Okay, so 30 minutes, does heavy lifting. So it did that. Scaffold, create types, create the use board. So it's proposing a use board composable, which it had done earlier. Create source. I mean, it is multi-step. The components are there. If there's a thing, mutates in card in place, later separately adding cards, run step. Okay, so this is kind of interesting. So if we're taking a look at the comparison between the two, it's So this one I don't think is as obvious. We don't see as much verbosity in the first one. Essentially, it's not like being as wordy. However, though, I would say between the two explainers that I saw, the I have ADHD one definitely got it to be more digestible in terms of kind of what's going on and highlighting like key points. And so again, the big caveat with all of this to remember when it comes to comparing sort of AI responses. So even though I've used Claude Code for both instances, we used Fable 5. I didn't make any modifiers, and we saw that it evoked the view best practices skills on either one. Regardless of that, it's still remember that AI is non-deterministic, meaning that you can feed the same question multiple times. You can always get something slightly different every time. Basically, or you can't be guaranteed to get the same result every single time. I wouldn't guarantee to say that it's always going to be different, because then that's ironically kind of in a way a form of determinism. But basically what we can see here though is that I would say that I have ADHD skill definitely added something to the workflow. And so in my mind, I would say when it comes to evaluating the skill and whether or not I'll be integrating it into my own workflows, I would say this definitely gets a thumb up on my end, as far as just like sort of this initial experiment and just the idea that it has for trying to streamline the output that AI gives you, because a lot of times you're trying to work through quite a bit of information. And so at the end of the day, though, here's the funny thing. Skills are great, and so while we can see inside of the repo, like it's popular. Oh wait, let me do the original one. It's a popular skill. It's only been released as I think last month. It looks like was the oldest commit. So it's not very old skill. Yet it has nearly 8,000 stars, a bunch of forks, a bunch of people watching it, and so at the end of the day, what I do want you to keep in mind when it comes to evaluating skills and seeing these people who come up with these skills is that these are not like coveted, protected, walled gardens. Skills are just markdown files that happen to provide some guidance to the AI on how it should work. But at the end of the day, rather than say, for example, if we use the software development analogy of when you npm install a package that someone else created to say, help you ensure that your, I don't know, like to remove white spaces, trailing white spaces or whatever, from, standardized inputs, right, from the user. It's a reliable library. It's great. Thousands of people use it. When you install it and call it, you generally don't touch it beyond any, like you might customize some of the things afterwards, but most people would probably not take the library, go in, tweak the source code, and then basically like go from there, right, and personalize it. If you're doing that at some point, you're basically like, it's a decent amount of work because a lot of work goes into these libraries, and I'm not saying people don't do that, but generally people just kind of trust the output. What I want to propose here and what I would like you to leave with is that when you're working with AI skills, it's really something you need to think about what its purpose is, what you like about it, but then go in and tweak it. Like basically you need to save your own copy, and rather, so for example, I installed it as a plugin marketplace. I have it now installed as a skill inside of my Claude agent. That's nice, but what I fully intend to do, and a workflow I do want to share, as I create more of these resources for working with AI and sort of sharing my own workflow, is that I will basically take the skill itself and then modify it to sort of my own opinions or what works well for me or what I've noticed as well. Because otherwise, these skills are, one, they're completely contingent on whether the author decides to update it, and two, they're updating it for what's worked. They're updating it based on what they believe works best in what they've seen. And there are so many different variations that comes with AI, and more importantly, there are so many variations in how we all work that we should be taking more ownership over these Claude skills and not relying so much on these sort of seemingly like package skills that we sort of never touch and never modify. So with that, yeah, I think that's a wrap for this particular video. And no, let's see. Yeah. And so I believe that's a wrap. And so, yeah, I hope you enjoyed this walkthrough. And if you get a chance, be sure to check out this I Have ADHD skill. Shout out to, I'm going to say Agri. I would say Agri, but the AY. Yeah, shout out to Agri for creating this, sharing it. It's clearly resonated with a lot of different people. And again, exciting to still see the open source community still there in terms of people sharing things. It's just the most important thing, if you want to support them, give them a like in terms of like starting the repo just to kind of show the support. But otherwise, I can't state this enough. I'm a big fan of customizing, bringing it in and owning the process so that you can better understand your skills and tailor the workflow that works best for you. All right, with that said, I guess I will talk to y'all later. Bye.